talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. It feels alright.
Good afternoon. Welcome along to NUFC Matters. This is the Eddie Howe Press Conference review for Leeds United at home, which kicks off 3 o'clock tomorrow on New Year's Eve. And as always, Eddie Howe held a press conference about half an hour up at St James's Park. Keith Downey was first in with the questions this morning and quite rightly started with the subject of the passing of Pele. Asked him if he'd ever seen him or met him, and he said, well, he'd seen videos of England versus Brazil in the 70s and grew up knowing him as the best player in the world. And obviously said that it was a very sad moment in football. He'd been watching a lot of the tributes and listening to a lot of the tributes on the way into the training ground this morning. Said he'd never met him. Also said that he would be having a chat with the Brazilian players within the squad because obviously, death of anybody, an icon of sport like that, does affect people in different ways. And certainly said he'd be speaking to Bruno and to Joe Linton and, having a chat with them. He was also asked by Keith about the injuries, said, well, as you know, without Kraft and without John Joe, he said there's also a couple of niggles in the squad. Keith pushed him on the John Joe issue, obviously saying he must be disappointed. And he said, look, he understood that John Joe, had come out and said that he wanted to be part of Newcastle's future, very excited about things. Eddie confirmed that, as you would expect, John Joe's disappointed. He said he's a passionate guy who lives for football and likes to show his skills off week in, week out. Just said that they were supporting him behind the scenes and that, he's come in and he's a lot more positive this week. And he's just focused on his rehabilitation. It's as simple as that, really. Basically, Keith then pushed him on transfers, saying, does this particular injury to John Joe alter the transfer, ideas in January? And he just said, as he said last week, we're analysing it on a daily basis and we're not going to be forced into an immediate reaction. Maybe it changes things, maybe it doesn't. Given very little away. Also asked him about Callum Wilson. He said Callum's improved on how he was feeling last week, and he trained yesterday. And that was really it. All he said to Keith on that. Also, Keith pushed him on Chris Wood. Said he must be happy with the way that he's playing. He said that Chris Wood's adapted well to the style of play. He said as a team that they've evolved and they've tweaked things this season. And he said that the Rio Vallecano game, Chris was outstanding, and he took that performance into Leicester. Very, very happy with Chris Wood, as you would imagine. Last question from Keith Downey from Sky was just about the unbeaten run. He says, if you win tomorrow, then, or you draw tomorrow, I guess, as long as you don't get beat, it's 4 months unbeaten. And, he said, what's your feelings on going, 4 months unbeaten? Typical Eddie Howe just said, I just don't like to reflect. He said, Leeds United at home is a big game for us. It's another big game. He says there's two teams there that are going to give their all. Leeds are very committed and leave everything on the pitch. So, again, Eddie Howe, not one for resting on his laurels, which is what you want to hear at the end of the day. Plenty of time for patting yourself on the back, I guess, at the end of the season, if things go well. Andy Sixsmith was next up. Again, asking about Pele. Just said, a lot of younger fans won't have even considered Pele, won't have seen much of him. How would you describe Pele to them? He said, well, I'd describe Pele as an incredibly talented player. He scored different types of goals, from spectacular to tap-ins. And he also just said, look, he was a sportsman and showed great sportsmanship. And he said there's so many iconic images stand out of Pele, throughout his career. And, that's the kind of player that you would probably aspire to be if you were a youngster. Also asked about, the pressure, I guess, of being high up the table. Is he feeling that pressure? Do you handle it any differently? He said, look, being high up the table is better than being at the other end of the table. He said, but with that comes different types of emotions, different types of pressures. And as he said many times at press conferences that I've listened to, we've just got to keep the squad focused, concentrated, and avoid complacency. That was the message that he was getting across. He was also asked about by Andy Sixsmith about those team photographs again. We've heard about them spoken. We've seen them, every time there's a win, there's a team photograph. Andy Sixsmith was focusing a bit on the unsung heroes that are being, dragged into the press conferences now. He mentioned Serena Taylor, the club photographer, for instance, who, she often takes the photographs. She was in this one. And he said, look, the team photos featuring unsung heroes are great. He says, everyone who interacts with the players at St James's Park affect things. And he says, no matter how big or small the interactions, they affect things. And he says, all of the people behind the scenes are very important to me. And he says, I hope I show that with the way that I interact with them. Again, great crack, and a great response. And he pushed him on the Wenger appearance at Arsenal as well, and just said, has there been any movements on, bringing club legends back into the stands at St James's? I mean, we've seen it behind the scenes. I can tell you now, Supermac is up there on a regular basis, whether he's working for the club or working alongside Bobby Moncur. There's a massive change, a massive improvement. I helped at the back end of last season. I was facilitating that. I was putting a few of the legends into the ground, and they've got the contacts with those people now, and that is what Eddie Howe is. He's there to manage the team, but he'd love to have more in at the training ground. Malcolm went up to the training ground. He spoke about it on his show on this channel about going up and giving the strikers advice. But yeah, look, Eddie Howe said today it was a really good moment to see Wenger at Arsenal, and he said, I would encourage that here. He said there's been no more progress on that, but there's no problem with it. It'll happen when it happens, I guess. And he pushed him on transfers. He said, what would you like Newcastle United squad to look like at the end of the January transfer window? And he said, I'd like it to look stronger, but what that looks like, I don't know. So again, playing his cards very close to his chest, and very sensible to do so, because you don't want someone coming in, putting the price up. Keep your cards close to your chest. Let the media speculate. Let them say that we're after this one. Let them say we're after that one. But in the grand scheme of things, nobody's got a bloody clue what is going on at Newcastle. So forget all the rumours, forget all the stuff that they hear. Just wait until they're holding the shirt up. I guess that's what I'm saying. The atmosphere in the team is another thing he talked about, and he just said, just looking ahead to the game tomorrow, it's going to be quite feisty, big travelling support. And he said, look, the atmosphere in the team at this ground complement each other. And he goes on later on the press conference to talk a little bit more about that. Nisha from the BBC was up next, asking him how difficult it was to motivate the players, especially when you're on this kind of run. And again, just reiterated that you've got to keep the players focused. You've got to keep pushing them, and that anything can happen. And also a little reminder from Eddie, not the first time he did it today either, that we're not even halfway through the season yet because of that break with the World Cup. Hold your horses, guys, more or less. Don't get too carried away. He was also asking about he was also asked by Nietzsche about, do you feel as if you've picked up where you left off before the World Cup break? And he went, in terms of results, yes, but there are things to improve. And he says, for me, that's good. In essence, we've beaten Bournemouth. We're through the quarterfinals. We've beaten Leicester. We've kept the run going, but there are things that they need to improve. And he's happy with that. He knows he's still got a job to do. He was asked about Leeds. Is it a potential banana skin? He went, yes, 100%. They're dangerous. And he says the support tomorrow from the fans is key. Lastly, from Nisha, asking about Isak, is he still on track? And he went, yes. Simple as that. He is still on track for making an appearance in January. Simon was next. Simon O'Rourke. Just asking him about the group, really. There's so little to ask Eddie once the first few questions have come out, especially when Keith gets about 5 or 6 at the start. But he just, he was asked about the group of players as a whole and how they've done. And he just said, look, I'm very proud of the group as a whole. I've seen people putting the team first as opposed to personal ambition. And he says, and the challenge as a manager and a coach is to maintain that. Dave was next, asking, is 40 points still the target? He just said, we don't have a target. He says, my target at the start of the season was to try and win every game. He says, we'll count the points at the end of the season. And again, he was pushed on, having to adapt being third place from the top as opposed to being third bottom. And he just said, look, I constantly adapt the side and the squad depending on results. And he says, I always have to think ahead because the game, football as a game, changes on a regular basis. And you've just got to anticipate what the next changes are going to be. So, but yeah. He just said, again, reiterated it's nicer to be at the top end rather than the bottom end. Simon Bird was next, I think it was, from the Daily Mirror. talking about psychology, Simon Bird saying that he'd spoken a lot about the psychology of football in previous interviews and stuff. And he just goes, yeah, we do use that kind of method. We do it in different ways. We do some things collectively as a group, speaking to the players as a squad. But other times we speak one-on-one with players, And he said the key really here is as well, he says that the players at the club at the moment are setting their own standards, and it's all about them maintaining those standards. And he also pushed a little bit more on the fact that there's some experienced players in the squad. He didn't pull anybody out in particular, but just said, it's a good mix of experienced players who have got better with playing alongside those experienced players. In all intents and purposes, it's a recipe. That's what it is. It's a recipe. Craig Hope from the Daily Mail was next. Talking about Brendan Rodgers, he said that the press had asked Brendan Rodgers if we can win the league. And then, he said, yeah, of course they can. And then started to go on for about a minute talking about Sven Botman. And how did they miss this guy kind of thing? And he said that, do other players talk to you about Sven Botman? And he said, look, I don't talk to other managers about my squad or my players. And Craig pushed him again. He said, well, how did the other clubs miss Sven Botman? And he said, look, you can't sign every player, every club's got different ways of recruiting. And, in this world, you can't sign every player. So it's as simple as that. And Newcastle didn't miss Botman. And aren't we thankful for that, eh? He then asked him, a question which, again, why ask these questions? I don't know something. Can we win the league? He paused, dramatic pause, and then just said, well, I won't say we can't. But, that'll get blown out of all proportion, I'm sure, on the back pages of the papers. And that's the kind of thing that comes back to haunt you. If you go on a bad run, you get laughed at, etc. And it puts Eddie Howe in such a horrendous position, because it's somebody, from my perspective, you're looking for a headline, and it might not be Craig who puts it. It could be one of the other papers who've got to come out with something. Eddie Howe says, I won't say we can't win the league, can be turned into we can win the league. It's just one of them things. That's the way it works. That's the beauty, though, of these press conferences, and the fact that the club are putting them up online now. We can actually hear what is being said. We can all take out about what we want to take out of it, but it shows quite clearly as well, I think. I'd love to know why, for instance, Keith Downey gets 6 questions at the start and Lee Ryder's at the end and only gets 1 or 2 questions. And you're left scraping the barrel for questions. Anyway, I'm babbling on. Ian was next, Ian Murtagh from the Daily Star. Ask him, and he pushed him on this a couple of times. Can you draw on the experiences that you had in previous seasons at other clubs, lower divisions, to get you through the stage that you're at now, i.e. you were at the top of the table in the old second division with Bournemouth and in the Championship with Bournemouth. You had successful promotion campaigns. Can you draw on the experiences with those in the sense that you're in the top 3 at the moment, you're pushing for a Champions League place? Can you draw on those experiences? He said, yes, you can, because the experience is the same in many ways. And, he said he loved being involved in promotion races. And, he says he would love to be able to use the same tactics that he used in those run-ins in a Premier League season. But again, reiterated, it's too early to talk about that. We're not even halfway through the season. Ian also asked him, is a draw at home 2 points dropped? And he said, well, it all depends on the circumstances. It's not always 2 points dropped. It depends on how the game has actually gone. Interesting questions, that, though, because, obviously he did have success, as we know, at Bournemouth, but, the Premier League's a different game. Miles from the Shields Gazette asked about Isak again, and, he just basically said, look, when he comes back, it'll be when he comes back. It'll, January is when we're looking at, and when he comes back, he's going to be like a new signing, but they're not going to risk him. He's got to be fit, and he's not going to play until he's fit. So it's as simple as that. Miles also asked him about Karius. Has there been any change on the contract front with him? And he went, no, there's no update on that. So Newcastle still not committing anything on the Karius situation. Kieran was next up. Just asked about Trippier, about his, suggesting that his experience will be vital in this second half of the season. He went, yeah, his experience is a big thing. He's had some great experiences at previous clubs. And, he went on to elaborate a bit more about reaction to winning, and how you react to winning runs and how you react to things. And I guess, again, from my point of view, it's, it's how Newcastle react to that first defeat is going to be the key, and Trippier will be vital in that. But yeah, you know, a little bit of praise for Trippier, because Kieran asked the question about Trippier. He also said, you know, last season in January, Trippier was an early signing. You know, will that be the case this time round? And he went, look, last year was different for us. You know, we needed somebody in. He came here. It wasn't about the money. It was about playing football. You know, and that's what he wanted. And we got him here, and that led to other players coming. You know, he says this year for Newcastle it's different because of financial fair play, and that's the first time he mentioned it, but not the first time he's mentioned it in press conferences. And he says, you know, we want to improve the squad all the time, but we've got to be careful with, you know, FFP. It's as simple as that. Chris was next up with his questions. And, you know, again, it was about transfers and, you know, is it difficult to bring players in? He went, you know, it will be a challenge because the 1 to 11 is good. They're performing well. You know, they're unbeaten nearly in 4 months. They're into the quarterfinals of a cup. You know, he said it's a case of can we improve the squad? And again, he mentioned financial fair play. And he went as far as saying that anything that we do now, of course, impacts on the summer's spending. So it's a fine line. I get the impression he knows fully what's going on. I personally feel, and again, this is just my opinion, I personally feel that they know who they want, and if they get them, they get them. If they don't, they don't. There's not going to be any panic at the club because they've got Isak coming back. They've got a team squad that's playing well. Has it changed things, do you think, with the midfield? We'll talk about that on the Amigos tonight, I'm sure. He also was asked about the home form, and again reiterated how important it is, you know, to have the crowd and involving the crowd. And he says that was the first thing that they did when they came to manage at Newcastle, that they had to get the crowd involved, they had to get the crowd on side, and they decided right from the off to playing high tempo football and giving everything to win, you know, was the way forward. And, you know, they needed that engagement with the supporters and the positivity, and they got it with the results, and just reiterated how much the crowd is like an extra man, a 12th man. And we've always known that, but, you know, it's great to hear Eddie Howe again, you know, pushing that message across before we all go to St James's Park tomorrow. Next up was Martin, asking about Isak again. Again, just trying to push for a date. He was trying to get him to say, well, is it going to be a cup game? Is it going to be a league game? He just said it'll be when he's fit. He's very close to training fully with the squad. He's had conversations with him to help him. He's got a long-term future here. He's supremely talented. But he did also say that it's not a case of him walking into the team, because Newcastle at this moment in time are on a good run of form and everybody is doing their bit. So from his perspective, you know, just reiterating that, you know, he's happy, Isak's happy, he's chomping at the bit to get in this, get fit and get in the team. And that's a great problem to have because he's going to be like a new player. Jordan Cronin asked about Matty Longstaff. He said Matty Longstaff's been, because obviously he picked up an injury on loan. He's been back at the club this week. He's been assessed. He looks like a difficult injury, he says, for him. He's going to have scans. And with his contract coming up at the end of the season, which is what Jordan was talking about, it's going to be difficult for him. Eddie just said, look, he's a brilliant lad. We like him as a person. We're going to support him as a club. And he's going to have a few scans this week, and we'll find out a little bit more. B-Rider, last again, got a couple of questions in, asking about Liverpool. He says, have they thrown down the gauntlet by signing a player so early? He said, well, you know, they've signed a good player. It doesn't impact on us. And basically just said, look, it's going to be interesting to see who people sign in this transfer window, what kind of transfer window it's going to be. And, you know, left it at that. Asked whether the midfield injury again, I'm not sure whether Lee missed the first part of the press conference because this had already been asked, or whether he's just struggling, like I said, to find a question to ask. But he said, you know, asking him, you know, because of the injury to John Joe, would it change Newcastle's mindset? And he just said, look, we are always reactive, you know, and we go into transfer windows and we look, and, you know, he says, but it's not changed the strategy, is more or less what he said. Lee then said, you know, he had to dig himself out a bit of a hole because he called this a derby against Leeds. You know, it's the closest thing to a derby, I think, is what he meant. And he had to reiterate later that he meant, well, it's kind of a derby, with Middlesbrough and Sunderland not being in the division, I guess. But he just said, look, it's going to be lively. It's a bit of a derby. two passionate sets of fans. It's going to be a white hot atmosphere. You know, are you just going to remind the players, you know, of what to do in that kind of environment? He just what can you say to that? He just said, look, you know, we know how important the game is. We just want to get the fans on saying want to go out and do a job. He was also asked by Lee about Isak coming in and, you know, 4-4-2. Is it out of fashion? We know what he was getting at. Is he going to play Isak and Wilson together? First of all, we've got to get them fit. And they've both got to be fit at the same time, haven't they? But he just said, when he was asked, is it out of fashion? He went, look, out of possession, 4-4-2, not many people go for it. No, out of possession, he said, it's in vogue. That's what he said, sorry. Out of possession, it's in vogue, but in possession, people don't set up as a 4-4-2, but people do fall into 4-4-2 throughout the game. He said, look, he'll never rule it out as far as a formation is concerned within a game. But he said, you know, I pick a team to produce results and, you know, let's see what happens. But he's certainly not going to be going 4-4-2 when Isak comes in. That's for certain. I think that's what you got from that answer. Last question was from Craig Hope. Sneaked a late one in. Is Callum Wilson in the squad? And he just said, see how he gets through training today. And that was the end of the press conference. Simple as that. As always, I hope that's made it a little bit easier for you to understand and got the answers you wanted today. I will be back in an hour's time with the Amigos. We are on 5 o'clock live until 7 o'clock. Spread the word. Let people know. I'm going to play out with the ads. A big thanks to all our sponsors. First off, Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists. You can find them at thegohd.com. And thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces. They are handmade in Cumbria and you can find more information out on their website, mrvickys.co.uk. And if you want to order any, email info@mrvickys.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Big thanks to Blowhole Brewery, a new beer made on Tyneside. The cans are all designed in the colours of Newcastle United strips from days gone by. Black and white there, the purple and blue, and the good old-fashioned blue from the Entertainers' days. But get more information on the Blowhole Brewery range, such as Geordie Juice from blowholebrewery.co.uk. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the technical side of things and video side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who do our website, NUFCmatters.com. If you want to subscribe to the show, then all you need to do is click the subscribe button below. You can also hit the thumb up, which does us a favour, by liking the video, and click share to your social media such as Twitter and Facebook. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes and Spotify and the rest. And if you want to contribute to the show, use the QR code. It takes you straight to the membership pack and you can join the channel. What do you get for your membership pack? You get a scarf, a cup, a pen and a membership card and entry into the monthly draw. You can also make a donation by hitting the $sign in the chat tonight. We also give you something for free if you subscribe to the show. To get your car sticker, email john@nufcmatters.com and he will post you one out. We also support the food bank on this show. And if you want to make a virtual donation to the food bank, then go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and make a donation today. On our website, we've got lots of t-shirts, cups, pens, you name it, memorabilia if you want to buy it and support the show. For Christmas, we have the Bruno Christmas jumper, which is selling rather well. And we'll have the bobble hats, Play Like Almiron, Bruno's Magic, and Bruno's 39 and Joe Linton's J7. Get yourself to nufcmatters.com to buy them today. If you want to buy people a ticket for one of our events next year, we've got an evening with Steve Howie, which is Friday the 24th of February at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are £50 from nufcmatters.com or newcastlelegends.com. And you can also buy them on voucher before Christmas. Get somebody a bargain and a nice Christmas present. Peter Beardsley is on the 10th of February at St. Dom's Catholic Club in Newcastle. Tickets available direct from the venue. And for this one, Friday the 2nd of June next year at the Grand Hotel in Gosforth, 6:30 start. an evening with Rob Lee, Lee Clark, and John Beresford. To book tickets, contact Natalie at healandtour.org.uk or visit their website, healandtour.org.uk/events. If you're looking for a Christmas present and people like a book, then get yourself NME from the Bender Squad to the Gremlins, or the last remaining copies of Black or White, No Grey Areas, Lee Clark's autobiography, and you can get them from www.badboysbooks.net.